They told you it was a hospital, a sanctuary for the fragile. But the math doesn't add up. A life-saving medical breakthrough, relegated to a carnival sideshow. Why charge a quarter to gaze upon a desperate medical procedure? This is the first rupture in the official narrative. A deep, resonant crack in the foundation of our history. Haven't you always felt it? That persistent hum of a lie just beneath the surface. If you feel this dissonance, leave your coordinates in the comments. Tell us from where and from what time you are bearing witness. The lie has a shape. It has a shadow. And now, we will walk directly into it. The first rule of forensic analysis is to secure the crime scene. In our investigation, the crime scene is not a room, but an entire era, preserved in silver nitrate and sepia tones. We begin with the physical evidence, the anomalies that hide in plain sight. We begin at the great world's fairs of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Look at the pavilions that house these so-called infant incubators. Your eyes are not deceiving you. We are told these were temporary structures, fantasies of plaster and wood erected for a summer's amusement. But what we see is something else entirely. We are looking at the integrated components of a single worldwide control matrix, a system designed not for entertainment, but for societal engineering on a scale that defies our conditioned imagination. Here, in this global synchronicity, we find the keystone, the missing link that solves the two most profound riddles of the 19th century reset. The first riddle, the orphan explosion. From where did the sudden, inexplicable flood of parentless children come? The second riddle, the repopulation. How were the vast, empty cities we see in early photographs, with their colossal infrastructure and eerily silent streets, refilled with people? The official history treats these as separate tragic footnotes. They are not. They are the input and output of a single horrifyingly logical machine. The incubator system was the source, the orphanages were the warehouses, and the orphan trains were the distribution network. This was the assembly line of the new humanity. Let us dissect this triad of oblivion. The incubators were the genesis point, the hatcheries. They were not saving a few thousand premature babies out of charity. They were producing a generation, a constant, reliable stream of new human life, untethered to any family, any history, any culture. Tabula rasa, blank slates, ready for programming. Once these infants reached a certain stage of maturation, they were discharged from the bioreactors. We see Cyclopean architecture, Greco-Roman temples of staggering scale and impossible ornamentation, structures that dwarf the cathedrals of old Europe. We see stone carved with a lost precision, doorways built for giants, and a sense of permanence that screams defiance against the official narrative of temporary amusement. Now apply the peasant paradox. At the base of these divine structures, lost in their colossal shadows, we see the supposed builders. Men in simple clothes, navigating streets of mud with horse-drawn carts. The cognitive dissonance is a physical sensation. A world of primitive, nascent technology existing alongside architectural and engineering feats that would challenge us even today. How can both be true? They cannot. One is the reality. The other is a cover story. And as we step through these impossible archways, the crime scene reveals its core function. Inside these temples of forgotten energy, we do not find the chaotic, desperate atmosphere of a pioneering medical ward. We find the cold, sterile logic of industry. We see rows upon rows of identical incubators, stretching into the distance like a production line. This is not the layout of a hospital. This is the layout of a factory. The sheer scale is an admission of guilt. This was not an exhibition to save a few unfortunate premature babies. This was mass production. But to where? They were moved to the next phase of the system. The orphanages. Look at the architecture of the great orphanages of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. They are not humble shelters. They are palaces, fortresses, vast, imposing structures built with the same old-world grandeur, often located in remote areas, far from public scrutiny. These were not charities. They were processing centers, holding pens where the products of the incubators were warehoused, categorized, and subjected to the initial phases of social and historical indoctrination. They were taught the new history, the new religion, the new identity. They were stripped of any possible connection to the world that came before, And when these children reached a certain age, the final stage of the logistical chain was initiated. The orphan trains. We are told this was a benevolent program to find loving homes for city waifs in the countryside. This is the saccharine cover story for a mass distribution of human assets. From the 1850s to the 1920s, hundreds of thousands of children were loaded onto trains and shipped across the country like livestock. They were lined up on stages in small towns for local families to inspect, to choose from. They were given new names, new birthdays, new lives. They became the seed population for the new America, their true origins erased, their memories non-existent. The infrastructure required to power and ventilate hundreds of these delicate life support machines 24 hours a day in an age of flickering gaslight and unreliable electricity represents a logistical paradox of the highest order. This was not a sideshow. It was a high-tech, high-capacity bioreactor, humming with inherited technology, reactivated from a previous cycle. The alteration of this evidence was not done with a wrecking ball. Not at first. It was done with a single, insidious act of rebranding. A factory for human beings was relabeled the baby show. A system of mass repopulation was disguised as a charitable novelty. And when the fairs were over, what happened to these magnificent, impossible structures? They were systematically demolished, erased. Why would a civilization build such wonders only to immediately destroy them? Because you do not preserve a crime scene. You sanitize it. You tear it down and plow it under the mud, hoping no one will ever ask the right questions again. But the photographs remain. The visual record is the ghost that haunts the official history. Look closely at these images. If you too can see this blatant contradiction, this architectural and technological impossibility, then confirm this transmission. Let your signal join a chorus of awakening minds, so that this evidence may escape the gravity of the algorithm and reach those still searching. The incubators provided the raw material. The orphanages provided the conditioning. The trains ensured the strategic dispersal of the amnesiac generation across the continent, guaranteeing that no collective memory of their origin could ever form. This was the engineering of oblivion, executed with cold, industrial precision. This system, this global repopulation program, is the great, unspoken secret of our modern world. It functioned as a reset button for human identity, creating a buffer generation that severed us completely from the timeline of our true ancestors. We are, in a very real sense, the descendants of this system. We are a civilization of foundlings, raised in the shadow of a technology we were told was a sideshow attraction. The evidence of this matrix is not hidden in a secret vault. It is in plain sight. It is the very fabric of our cities. The same architectural DNA that unified the world's fairs, that housed the incubator pavilions, is present where you live. I guarantee it. Those grand stone buildings downtown. The old post office that looks like a Roman temple. The county courthouse with its impossible dome. The library that seems more like a palace for giants than a repository for books. We are told they are products of their time, built by men in top hats with horse-drawn cranes. What you are witnessing is not a hospital. It is the silent industrial heart of the Great Reset. And so, we arrive at the story. The official story. The one carefully placed in the history books, polished, and presented for our consumption. It is a story designed to soothe, to explain away the anomaly, to neatly file the impossible under the heading of human ingenuity. It is, in essence, a fairy tale. And like all fairy tales, it begins with a hero. His name, they tell us, was Dr. Martin County. A visionary, a maverick, a lone warrior, battling a skeptical medical establishment to save the lives of the most fragile infants. We are meant to picture him, this noble pioneer, traveling the world with his miraculous invention, setting up his life-saving exhibits at world's fairs and amusement parks out of sheer desperation and philanthropic zeal. He was forced, the narrative insists, to operate on the fringes, next to the freak shows and the roller coasters, because the ossified minds of mainstream medicine simply could not grasp his genius. He charged the public a quarter, not for profit, but to fund his noble crusade. It is a charming tale, a tale of underdog triumph, of science and compassion winning the day. It has all the elements of a perfect, heartwarming legend. But now you can feel the resonance, can't you? the profound dissonance of the official story. These structures are everywhere. They are the silent, stone witnesses to the Great Silence, the remnants of the unified global civilization that was fractured. Look for them in your own town. You have seen these buildings your entire life, but you have never truly seen them. Now, you will. They are not just old architecture. They are fragments of the machine, remnants of the world that was, and the system that created ours. Go and see for yourself. Where are they in your city? Count them. Photograph them. And ask the forbidden question, who really built them, and for whom? The answer is the beginning of our own awakening. This is perhaps the most difficult truth to confront. Not the cataclysm itself, but the nature of our survival. The story we tell ourselves is one of ingenuity, of brave pioneers pulling themselves up from the mud and horse-drawn carts to build a new world of steam and steel. But the evidence suggests a far more tragic, more humbling reality. It suggests we are not the builders of this world, but merely its inheritors. Tenants in a palace whose original architects are long gone. We are a post-catastrophe culture, and our defining characteristic is a profound, institutionalized amnesia. And it is, from a logistical and engineering standpoint, utterly and completely absurd. We are asked to believe that one man, a single entrepreneur, conceived, funded, and managed a global, industrial-scale operation in an age of horse-drawn carts and nascent electricity. Let us, for a moment, step out of the storybook and into the cold, hard light of reality. Let us perform a forensic audit of this legend. The official chronology presents us with a technology that appears ex nihilo, fully formed, perfected, and ready for mass deployment. Where are the decades of research and development? Where are the prototypes, the failed models, the academic papers charting the slow, arduous process of invention? There are none. The incubator system materializes in the historical record as if delivered from another time. We are shown the finished product, but never the workshop. This is not how technology evolves. This is how it is found. This is the signature of inherited technology. Then there is the logistical paradox. A single one of these units required precise thermoregulation, filtered air circulation, and a constant, uninterrupted supply of electricity. A staggering feat in a world where most cities were still lit by gas. An entire pavilion with 50 or 100 of these machines running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, would have a power and infrastructure requirement comparable to a modern factory or a small town. To understand the incubator system, you must first understand the psychology of the survivor who has lost everything, including the memory of how things work. You must understand the principle of the cargo cult. Anthropologists observed this phenomenon in remote islands after World War II. During the war, advanced aircraft landed, bringing unimaginable wealth, cargo from the sky. The islanders saw men in uniforms perform strange rituals. They marched in formation, sat in towers with headphones, and waved lights on runways. And the sky gods would deliver. When the war ended and the planes stopped coming, the islanders, in their grief and confusion, began to mimic the rituals they had witnessed. They carved wooden headphones, built life-sized airplanes from straw and vine, and marched with bamboo rifles, hoping to summon the cargo back. They perfectly replicated the form of the activity, but had zero comprehension of the underlying function. The ritual was a desperate attempt to interface with a technology they perceived as magic. Now look again at the late 19th century. Look at the new human beings, the survivors, the parasites, whatever they were, stumbling through the silent, ornate cities of their predecessors. They found an infrastructure of impossible complexity. Power grids humming with a forgotten energy source. Acoustic technology built into the very stones of the architecture. And we are told this was set up, time and again, in temporary exhibition halls? That this intricate life support grid was simply improvised on the grounds of Coney Island? The cognitive dissonance required to accept this is immense. Ask yourself, who manufactured these thousands of identical, precision-engineered machines? Where were the foundries casting the metalwork? The factories producing the specialized glass? The workshops calibrating the delicate thermostats? There is no record. No paper trail. No mention of a county incubator corporation with the industrial might to sustain such an enterprise. The supply chain is a ghost. The entire support infrastructure is a gaping black hole in the historical record. This is the Great Silence, that betrays the lie. Dr. County was not an inventor. He was a front man, an operations manager. He was the public face assigned to a pre-existing, inherited system. His carefully crafted biography is the cover narrative, designed to answer the inconvenient questions of how and why before they are even asked. His story is a beautiful, ornate patch, sewn over a tear in the fabric of reality. It serves to distract from the two questions that truly matter. The questions they never want us to ask. 1. Who built this vast global network in the first place? And 2. The most chilling question of all. In a world supposedly teeming with new life, in the midst of a population boom, where did they get the babies? And in certain buildings, these rows upon rows of humming, glowing pods, they did not have the blueprints, they did not have the physics, they did not possess the biological science to understand what these machines were truly for, perhaps for accelerated gestation, perhaps for genetic engineering, perhaps for purposes our diminished minds can no longer even conceive. But through trial and error, they discovered its most basic, most primitive function. You place an infant life form inside, and the machine completes the maturation process. It was the equivalent of finding a quantum computer and using it as a simple calculator. The higher functions were lost, inaccessible. The profound science was reduced to a simple, mechanical process, an input and an output, a factory line. But how do you explain this found technology to a new, traumatized population you are trying to indoctrinate into a new historical timeline? How do you normalize a factory for human beings? You don't. You create a cargo cult. You invent a story, a ritual, a performance that mimics the appearance of a science you no longer possess. You dress women in pristine white uniforms, not as technicians, but as priestesses. You create a sterile, clinical environment, not for hygiene in a way you scientifically understand, but as a ceremonial stage. Where did the constant, uninterrupted 40-year-long supply of thousands upon thousands of premature infants come from to fill every one of these machines, in every city, at every fair? The official story remains silent on this point, hoping we are too charmed by the tale of the kindly doctor to notice the dark mathematics humming just beneath the surface. They present us with a solution, the incubator, but they never want us to properly scrutinize the problem it was supposedly solving. Does this fairy tale resonate with your understanding of the world? Does the image of a lone doctor orchestrating a global industrial rollout in the 1890s seem plausible to you? Or do you, like us, feel the deep, unsettling resonance of an anomaly? Do you sense that you are not being told a history, but being read a script designed to paper over the evidence of a world that was, and a technology that should not have been? The fragility of this narrative is its greatest weakness. And by pulling on this one single thread, the entire tapestry of their manufactured history begins to unravel. The official story is a lullaby, sung to us to keep us from looking too closely at the machine in the corner of the room. You call the machines incubators, a familiar agricultural term. You call the infants premature, a medical explanation that requires no further questions. You call the man in charge, doctor, the new high priest of this modern medical miracle. The entire spectacle of the baby incubator shows was a cargo cult ritual on a global scale. The paying public wasn't witnessing the birth of modern medicine. They were witnessing the ritualized operation of a salvaged, misunderstood technology. They were watching the islanders marching with their bamboo rifles, the white coats, the meticulous charts, the scientific-sounding language. It was all a performance, a grand piece of theater designed to mask an incomprehensible truth, that the operators were simply pushing buttons on a machine they had found, a relic of a civilization so advanced it might as well have been divine. This is the survivor's mimicry. It's the deep, instinctual need to repurpose the tools of the old world into the rituals of the new one, and it wasn't limited to the incubators. We see this cognitive dissonance everywhere. We see magnificent cathedrals built with a lost understanding of acoustics and harmonic resonance, their spires acting as atmospheric energy conductors, repurposed as simple houses of worship. We turned power plants into temples because it's easier to worship a force you cannot comprehend than to admit you've lost the knowledge to control it. A tale of a single benevolent doctor fighting a skeptical world. It is a story designed for comfort, not for scrutiny. But we are not here for comfort. We are here for the forensic truth. And the truth is not found in storybooks. It is found in shipping manifests, in electrical load calculations, and in the cold, unforgiving laws of physics. The narrative of Dr. County is not just fragile. It is a mathematical impossibility. Let us for a moment set aside the grand conspiracy and perform a simple logistical audit, the kind any project manager would conduct before signing off on an impossible task. Let's begin with a single incubator, not 100, just one. The official narrative presents it as a simple, heated box. The physical reality is a piece of precision engineering. It required a cast metal or steel chassis precisely milled. It required panels of tempered glass, a technology still in its infancy and prohibitively expensive. It required a reliable thermostat, likely a mercury-based regulator, to maintain a temperature within a life-or-death tolerance of 1 or 2 degrees. It needed a filtered ventilation system to provide clean air, and a heating element, likely electrical, that could operate continuously without fail. Now, multiply the man-hours, the raw materials, and the specialized tooling required for this one unit. We see obelisks, once technological components of a global energy grid, now standing as inert monuments in our city squares. The function is gone. Only the form, the ritual, remains. We live our lives inside a machine we have mistaken for a museum. This is the source of our collective melancholy. The feeling that something is missing. The strange hollow resonance we feel when we look at an old photograph or stand before a piece of impossible architecture. It's the ghost of a lost function. It is the inherited trauma of a species-wide amnesia. We are orphans, not just of a lost history, but of a lost science, a lost potential. We are the children of the cargo cult, going through the motions, performing the rituals, hoping that one day the sky gods will return and show us what all these buttons were really for. If this vision of a humanity adrift in the technological ruins of its own forgotten past resonates with you, if you have ever felt that sense of profound loss for something you cannot name, then you are beginning to remember. That feeling is not a flaw, it is a signal, and we need more people who are willing to listen to it. Check to see that you are subscribed. Where are the factories? Where are the blueprints that go beyond a simple conceptual patent? Where are the records of the foundries casting these identical chassis by the hundreds? This is the first entry in our audit. A profound manufacturing vacuum. A great silence, where the roar of industry should be. But the true impossibility begins with power. A single incubator, using the inefficient electrical heating technology of the late 19th century, would have drawn a constant load of several hundred watts. Let us be conservative and say 300 watts, for one machine. Now, look at the photographs of the World's Fair pavilions. We see 50, 60, sometimes over 100 of these units, humming in unison. 100 incubators at 300 watts each is 30,000 watts, or 30 kilowatts. That is the constant, non-negotiable power draw for the incubators alone, not including lighting, ventilation fans, sterilization equipment, or water heaters. This was not a load you could simply plug into the wall. In the 1890s, there was no wall to plug into. The electrical grid was a patchwork fantasy, a novelty for the wealthy that was notoriously unreliable. Entire city districts would flicker and die without warning. Yet here, in what we are told are temporary fairground structures, we have a power demand equivalent to a modern-day industrial workshop, requiring a level of stability that even today's hospitals achieve with massive backup generators. There is much more of our lost inheritance to uncover, and we must do it together. A system of this magnitude, this industrial-scale production of human life, does not exist in a vacuum. It is not an answer to a common problem. It is the answer to a final one. The incubator network was not a proactive invention. It was a reactive necessity, a consequence. To understand the cure, you must first be willing to witness the disease. You must be willing to look directly into the abyss of the event they erased, the Great Silence. This mechanism of silence was born from a cataclysm of unimaginable scale. The evidence suggests 2 possible instruments for this global depopulation. The first is a world drowned in silence and soil. Imagine a soundless wave, not of water but of earth, a planetary liquefaction event, the so-called mud flood, that turns the ground beneath grand cities into a devouring sea of mud, burying a civilization whole, suffocating its population in an instant. It leaves the tops of magnificent structures poking through the new ground level like tombstones, a silent testament to a world that was simply swallowed. Or perhaps something quieter, more surgical, a silent atmospheric fire, a coronal event, a plasma discharge that scours life from the surface of the planet, but leaves the stone and copper infrastructure perfectly, hauntingly intact. This was a 24/7 operation. That's 720 kilowatt hours per day, every single day, for months. To generate that power with the technology of the era would require a dedicated steam engine and dynamo, a small power plant on site. Such a plant would consume tons of coal each week. It would require constant maintenance by trained engineers and stokers. It would need a supply of fresh water for the boiler and a system to manage the smoke and ash. Where are the records for these power stations? Where are the coal delivery receipts? The employment logs for the engineers? They do not exist. They are not there. We are asked to believe that a sideshow attraction nestled between the Ferris wheel and the hot dog stand possessed an independent power infrastructure more robust and reliable than that of the host city itself. This is not a historical puzzle. It is a violation of the laws of thermodynamics and economics. It is a logistical paradox. Now let's audit the human supply chain. A pavilion with 100 infants required a staff of dozens of nurses. The narrative praises these women as angels of mercy. They were. But they were also a logistical army. A 24-hour cycle requires at least 3 shifts. To maintain a safe nurse-to-infant ratio, even a poor one by modern standards, would demand at least 30 to 40 nurses on payroll at any given time. A weapon that kills the operator but leaves the machine pristine. Cities filled with silent architecture, power plants waiting for a hand on a switch, and bioreactors humming in empty palaces. This was not a tragedy, it was an opportunity. For the few who survived, or the few who orchestrated it, this was the Great Clearing. The ultimate archival burn. A chance to reset the timeline, to inherit a world without its memory. An engineering of forgetting on a planetary scale. The process was methodical, brutal. First, you erase the physical records. You burn the libraries. You melt the printing presses. You rewrite the books, adding a single letter, N, I, or AJ, to the calendar to stretch 1,000 years of stolen history over the chasm of what was lost. You create a new, primitive timeline to explain away the inherited technology as your own miraculous progress. But books are not enough. You must erase the memory from the bloodline itself. You need a new population, a blank slate generation born without parents to tell them of the world before the fall. And so, the inherited machines are switched on. The bioreactors, rebranded as incubators, begin their silent, tireless work. The orphanages become holding pens. The trains become the distribution network for the new human crop. These women needed to be trained, housed, and fed. They needed a constant supply of clean, sterilized linens, hundreds of changes per day. They needed a source of sterilized water and a method for preparing infant formula on an industrial scale, or, more likely, a roster of wet nurses, which introduces an entirely new layer of logistical complexity. Who managed this? Who paid for it? We are told the 25-cent admission fees of curious onlookers covered these astronomical operating costs. Let us run those numbers. To cover the salaries, the fuel, the food, the laundry, and the maintenance for a 100-incubator facility would have required thousands of paying visitors every single day, not just on sunny weekends, but on rainy Tuesdays and cold winter nights. The revenue model is as fantastical as the technology itself. The admission fee was never about funding. It was a conditioning mechanism, a ritual of normalization. The public was paying for the privilege of having their perception of reality re-engineered, to accept the sight of masked, parentless infants as a miracle of progress, rather than as evidence of the industrial-scale repopulation system it truly was. The most glaring item in this audit, the one that stops the heart, is the supply of the infants themselves, the raw material for this entire enterprise. These children, born of the machine, are given new names, new families, and a new fabricated history. They are the seeds of our amnesiac civilization. We are the children of this system, the descendants of the blank slates. Our innate feeling of displacement, the cognitive dissonance we feel when we gaze upon the impossible architecture of the old world, is not nostalgia. It is a phantom limb, the memory of a history that was amputated from us at birth. We are a civilization of orphans, raised in the ruins of our parents' forgotten kingdom, taught to call it progress. They engineered our forgetting. They built our reality on a foundation of silence. But they made one critical error. They left the evidence standing all around us, and they underestimated our ability to see, to question, and to speak. Their silence is the weapon they use to create this prison. Our voice is the key to dismantling it. Share this transmission. It is more than information. It is an act of reclamation. Send it to those whose eyes are ready to open. The final conclusion, then, is not one of stone and mortar. It is one of blood and memory. If the incubators were the wombs of our modern world, then we must confront the staggering implication. Our entire civilization was born an orphan. Hospitals of the era were few, and their ability to save a premature baby was virtually non-existent. For these incubator pavilions to operate continuously for over 40 years across dozens of cities and countries required a steady, predictable, and massive influx of premature babies. Where did they come from? The numbers required to keep these facilities stocked defy all known birth and infant mortality statistics of the period. There simply weren't that many viable premature infants being born and transported to these specific locations. The question is not just a historical curiosity. It is the central pillar of the entire deception. The supply chain did not begin at a hospital maternity ward. It began somewhere else, a place that has been surgically removed from our history. The math does not lie. The tonnage of steel, the megawatts of power, the mountains of coal, the rivers of milk, the legions of staff, they all scream the same truth. This was not the work of one man. This was not a charming carnival show. This was the visible component of a vast, pre-existing, and well-funded infrastructure, an inherited technology being operated by a new management that perhaps only barely understood its original function. They want us to accept a story that violates the fundamental principles of logistics, economics, and engineering. We are a species with amnesia, a culture of foundlings waking up in the nursery of our ancestors, told that their palaces were our first crude huts. This is the source of our deep, unnamed anxiety, the feeling of cosmic displacement, the sense that we are strangers in our own home, playing with the artifacts of a civilization far greater than our own, without the instruction manual. That feeling of profound cognitive dissonance you experience when you stand before the impossible architecture of the old world, that is not confusion. It is resonance, a phantom limb, the echo of a past that was amputated from our collective soul. The narrative they gave us, one of slow, linear progress from mud huts to marble halls, was designed to be the anesthetic for that amputation. But the anesthesia is wearing off. We are beginning to feel the ache of what we have lost. The official story is a cover story not just for a forgotten technology, but for a stolen identity. We have been taught to see ourselves as the pinnacle of human achievement, when the evidence suggests we are but the pale shadow of our true progenitors. We are the children of a silent apocalypse, repopulated through an inherited technology we were never meant to understand, and raised on a diet of historical fiction. They present us with an anomaly and call it a miracle. But when we audit the evidence, we find no miracle. We find only a cover story, a beautifully crafted lie designed to hide the impossible truth of a world that was emptied and then refilled. The numbers are not a theory. They are a physical constraint. They form an equation of impossibility whose only logical solution is that the history we have been taught is a fabrication. If you can find another explanation that satisfies the cold arithmetic of this reality, we are eager to see your calculations. The logistical paradox of the incubator system is not a flaw in the official narrative. It is its most perfect feature. A lie of this magnitude, this mathematically elegant impossibility, is not the clumsy work of a single huckster. It is the signature of a far more sophisticated intelligence. It is the sterile, white-gloved hand of a system architect, deliberately crafting a cover story so absurd that to question it is to appear insane. The lie is the firewall. Dr. County was not the entrepreneur. He was the press release. The operational impossibility we have audited is not evidence of his failure, but proof of a vast, pre-existing, and fully operational infrastructure. The question was never how one man accomplished this. Our history is not a record, but a program. A control matrix engineered for one purpose: oblivion. The engineering of our forgetting. They needed a new population, one with no connection to the previous world, to ensure the Great Silence would be permanent. And they succeeded, for a time. But memory is persistent. Truth resonates in the silent language of the stones, in the logistical paradox of our own origins, in the glaring anomalies they pray we will continue to ignore. To investigate these incubators, these orphan trains, these empty Tartarian cities, is therefore not a mere intellectual exercise. It is the most sacred act of rebellion imaginable. It is an act of genealogical reclamation. It is the search for our true parents, and in doing so, the recovery of our true selves. This is not about rewriting history books. It is about reclaiming the human soul from the architects of our amnesia. The truth does not offer comfort. It offers dignity. It offers the chance to stop being orphans of history and start being the inheritors of a legacy they tried to bury. This forensic investigation does not end here. It is only the beginning of the reclamation. If you feel the call to continue unearthing this truth with us, to dismantle the false matrix brick by brick, then subscribe and activate the signal. The real question is, who were the original operators, and what was the true scale of their program? To answer this, we must zoom out. We must release our focus from the single data point of Coney Island and allow the cognitive dissonance to wash over us. The anomaly was not confined to an American amusement park. This was not a local curiosity. We are forced to confront a disorienting, vertigo-inducing truth. The Incubator exhibits were a global, synchronized event, a recurring echo in the grand halls of the so-called Golden Age. We pull back from the shores of New York and cross the Atlantic in an instant. It is Paris, 1900, l'Exposition Universelle. And there, nestled among the grand palaces of electricity and industry, is the Pavillon des Couveuses d'Enfants. The same glass boxes, the same uniformed nurses, the same business model, the same quiet industrial efficiency. We jump to Berlin to the Great Industrial Exposition. The Kinderbrutenstalt, they called it, the child hatchery. The name itself, stripped of the romanticism of the American incubator, betrays a colder, more Germanic honesty about its function. It's there again, a carbon copy. We cross the channel to London, to the Earl's Court exhibition. The technology is identical, the presentation is identical, the narrative is identical. Welcome to the resistance. From Buffalo to St. Louis, from city to city, fair to fair, the system appears, fully formed, operating at peak capacity, and then vanishes, leaving behind only faded photographs and a story that crumbles under the slightest pressure. This is not the pattern of a single invention spreading organically. This is the pattern of a franchise. A global blueprint being rolled out simultaneously by a centrally coordinated authority. An authority that operated with impunity, using the World's Fairs as its stage, its showroom, and its public conditioning program. And what else do we see at these fairs? What is the one, unifying, screaming anomaly that connects them all? The architecture. The same impossible, Cyclopean, Greco-Roman, and Beaux-Arts structures that we are told were built of plaster and wood, only to be torn down after 6 months. The same Tartarian resonance we find in the silent, magnificent buildings that still stand in our own cities, dwarfing the supposed technological capabilities of their alleged builders. The incubator pavilions were housed within this very same architectural matrix. They were not an addition to it, they were an integral part of it. The same civilization that built the energy-harnessing temples also built the bioreactors to fill them. The connection is inescapable. We are not looking at separate phenomena.